An accused killer has been caught in the oldest known murder.
A detective finishing the work that his father started more than 40 years ago.
The work that is done on cold cases is typically behind the scenes. There can be a thought that maybe these cases are forgotten about, that maybe they've just been pushed to the back burner, but that is absolutely not the case.
Time doesn't heal all wounds. It just makes them less raw. These words, spoken by the sister of a murder victim, capture the decades-long pain of families waiting for justice. In 2024, time finally caught up with 4 killers who thought they had escaped the law. From a nameless child found in 1971 to a young woman murdered in 1993, these cold cases seem destined to remain unsolved. But advances in DNA technology and relentless detective work led to breakthroughs. 4 families finally got the answers they had been seeking for over 40 years. This is their story. A child without a name, the Kenyatta Odom Case. For 53 years, she was a nameless child, a tiny body found in heartbreaking circumstances. But in 2024, baby Jane Doe finally got her name back. It started on a chilly April morning in 1971, workers clearing brush along a creek in East St. Louis, Illinois made a grim discovery. There, partially hidden, was an old TV cabinet. Inside, they found a small suitcase filled with cement, and within that crude tomb was the body of a little girl. The child was estimated to be between 2 and 5 years old. She had long, dark hair and wore only a white plastic band around her wrist. The coroner determined she died from a blow to the head. But beyond these basic facts, her identity remained a mystery. Police canvassed the area and put out bulletins, but no one came forward. Days turned to weeks, then months, then years. Baby Jane Doe was given a proper burial, but her real name remained unknown. For decades, the case went cold. Detectives retired, evidence gathered dust, and time passed. But in 2019, a breakthrough came. The St. Clair County Sheriff's Department decided to try genetic genealogy, a technique that had solved other cold cases. After years of research, genealogists identified a possible family tree. Detectives reached out to potential relatives, and the pieces started falling into place. Baby Jane Doe had a name, Kenyatta Odom. She was just 5 years old when her life ended. Her family had reported her missing back in 1971, but the report was somehow lost in the system. For over 5 decades, they lived with the agony of not knowing what happened to their little girl. The revelation brought a mix of closure and renewed grief. Kenyatta's siblings, now in their 60s, finally knew their sister's fate, but it also raised new questions about her death. While Kenyatta's identity was solved, the investigation into her murder continues. But now she's no longer just a nameless victim. She's Kenyatta Odom, a little girl who was loved and is mourned by name. But Kenyatta wasn't the only one who got her name back in 2024. Another long-standing mystery was about to unravel, bringing justice to a young woman whose life ended over 3 decades ago. 31 years of silence, justice for Carmen Van Huss. In March 1993, 19-year-old Carmen Van Huss was brutally murdered in her Indianapolis apartment. The crime scene was horrific. Carmen had been stabbed multiple times and sexually assaulted. Despite an intensive investigation, leads quickly dried up. The killer had left behind DNA evidence, but in 1993, the technology to fully utilize it wasn't available. For years, Carmen's case sat cold. Her family never gave up hope, but with each passing anniversary, the chances of solving the murder seemed to dim. Detectives cycled through the case, following up on tips that went nowhere. DNA databases expanded, but no matches were found. As technology improved, investigators periodically re-examined the evidence. They ran the DNA through updated systems, hoping for a hit. But year after year, the results came back the same. No match. It seemed like Carmen's killer might never face justice. Then, in 2021, a new team of detectives decided to try genetic genealogy. They needed a fresh DNA sample to compare to their suspect pool. Investigators began surveilling potential suspects, watching and waiting. They needed something with DNA that could be tested. One day, a suspect casually tossed away a piece of chewing gum. Detectives carefully collected the gum and sent it to the lab. When the results came back, they were conclusive. the DNA on the gum matched the DNA from the 1993 crime scene. After 31 years, a killer had unknowingly revealed himself through a thoughtless act. In September 2024, police arrested 55-year-old Dana Jermaine Shepherd for the murder of Carmen Van Huss. He had been living in Indianapolis the whole time, just miles from where the crime occurred. The arrest brought a mix of emotions for Carmen's family: relief, sadness, and a renewed sense of loss. While the case against Shepherd is still ongoing, the breakthrough serves as a reminder. No matter how much time passes, justice can still prevail. Sometimes it just takes a fresh set of eyes, advancing technology, and even a piece of discarded gum to bring a decades-old mystery to a close. While Carmen's case relied on modern tech, our next story shows that sometimes the key to cracking a cold case is much closer to home. It's a tale of determination that spans generations, proving that in the pursuit of justice, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Like father, like son, the Blaylock mystery. In Crown Point, Indiana, a killer thought they'd escaped justice for over 40 years. But they didn't count on Detective John Mowry Jr. picking up where his father left off. It all started on a winter night in 1981. John Blaylock, a local resident, was found murdered. Detectives, including John Mowry Sr., swarmed the crime scene. They collected evidence and interviewed witnesses. But despite their efforts, the case went cold. Leads dried up. Witnesses' memories faded. The blood evidence, while potentially valuable, couldn't be fully analyzed with the technology available then. Fast forward to 2018. Detective Mowry Jr., following in his father's footsteps, reopened the case. He'd grown up hearing about the Blaylock murder, a case that haunted his father throughout his career. Now, armed with both his father's insights and modern forensic tools, Mowry Jr. dug in. He started by reviewing old case files and re-interviewing witnesses. But his ace in the hole was the preserved blood evidence from the original crime scene. Thanks to DNA technology advancements, Mowry Jr. sent the samples for analysis. In early 2024, the results came back. The analysis identified potential family connections to a suspect named Gregory Thurston. With this new lead, the investigation kicked into high gear. Detectives gathered more evidence, building a solid case. Finally, 43 years after John Blaylock's murder, they made an arrest. Gregory Thurston was taken into custody. For Detective Mowry Jr., it was more than solving a cold case. It was fulfilling a legacy, finishing what his father had started all those years ago. The arrest brought closure to the Blaylock family and the entire Crown Point community. A tiny sample of blood, preserved for over 4 decades, had finally spoken the truth. In the world of cold cases, patience and persistence can pay off in unexpected ways. The gum that caught a killer. Barbara Tucker's case closed. In Gresham, Oregon, a killer's careless moment finally gave Barbara Tucker's family the answers they'd been seeking since 1980. Barbara, a 19-year-old college student, was brutally attacked while walking to a night class at Matt Hood Community College in January 1980. Her body was found the next day in a nearby grassy area, sexually assaulted and murdered. The initial investigation was intense, but leads quickly dried up. The case went cold, leaving Barbara's family and the community without answers. For years, detectives revisited the case, hoping for a breakthrough. They re-examined evidence and followed up on new tips, but nothing panned out. In 2021, investigators turned to genetic genealogy. Using DNA evidence from the crime scene, they identified a likely suspect, Robert Plimpton, who had lived in the area at the time of Barbara's murder. To confirm the match, detectives needed a current DNA sample from Plimpton. The break came when detectives observed Plimpton casually toss away his chewing gum. They quickly retrieved the discarded item and sent it to the lab for testing. The results were conclusive. The DNA on the gum matched the DNA from the 1980 crime scene. In March 2024, Robert Plimpton was convicted of Barbara Tucker's murder and sentenced to life in prison. For Barbara's family, the verdict brought a mix of relief and renewed grief. Her sister expressed the bittersweet nature of the moment, saying, "Someone brutally took her away from us when she was so young and went on living their life after." The case highlights the advancements in forensic technology and its power to solve decades-old crimes. It also demonstrates how a seemingly insignificant action can lead to a breakthrough in a long-standing cold case. These cases span over half a century, from the 1971 discovery of Kenyatta Odom to the 2024 conviction of Robert Plimpton. The longest gap was 53 years for baby Jane Doe. That's a long time for families to wait for answers. Closure brings mixed emotions for families. Carmen Van Huss's brother said, "She was taken from me when I was a freshman in high school, and I'm glad the man who did it is where he belongs." Communities feel the impact, too. Long-standing mysteries affect our sense of safety. When they're solved, it shows that justice can still happen, even if it takes time. There are still many unsolved cases out there. With about 250,000 cold cases in the U.S., a lot of families are waiting for answers. These cases show that persistence and new technology can make a difference, even decades later.